The message came on a Tuesday morning, Earth time. It traveled across 400 light-years, passed through 17 relay stations, and arrived at the United Defense Council headquarters in Seoul. The woman who first read it laughed. She thought it was a joke. Then she read it again, and her face went pale. Overseer Knoll of the Vorn Collective had ruled his empire for 300 years. His species had conquered the Orion Spur 12,000 years before humans learned to make fire. They had crushed 47 intelligent species. Some they enslaved, others they erased from existence. The Vorn did not negotiate. They did not compromise. They simply took what they wanted, and no one had ever stopped them. The message was simple. Humanity had 30 standard cycles to surrender all colonial holdings. They would submit to collective governance. They would hand over their military technology. They would accept Vorn oversight of their homeworld. If they refused, they would be destroyed. Admiral Taeho Beck read the message in his office on the 47th floor. He was 63 years old, with gray hair and calm eyes. He had fought in 3 wars and won them all. He was known for his patience. Some said he thought too slowly. Others said he never made a move until he was certain of victory. He read the message 3 times. Then he called General Hana Yoon. Hana arrived within the hour. She was 51, tall and thin, with short black hair and a face that rarely showed emotion. She led Earth's Stealth Operations Division. Her work was classified at the highest levels. Most people in the military did not even know her name. Taeho showed her the message. She read it without expression. The Vorn Collective, she said. 9,000 warships, population of 800 billion across 200 star systems. They have never lost a war in recorded history. I know, Taeho said. Our fleet is 400 ships. Our population is 11 billion. I know. Hana looked at him. What do you want to do? Taeho was quiet for a long moment. He looked out his window at the city below. Millions of people living their lives, going to work, raising their children. They did not know that an alien empire had just threatened to destroy everything they loved. Initiate protocol, Hanji, he said. Hana's eyes widened slightly. It was the only sign of surprise she allowed herself. Are you certain? Yes. Protocol Hanji was a contingency plan that humanity had developed 40 years ago. It was meant for exactly this situation, an overwhelming enemy. No chance of winning a direct fight. It required complete commitment and perfect secrecy. It had never been tested. Within 6 hours, orders went out to every human colony in the galaxy. The orders were simple. Go dark, shut down all transmissions, evacuate all civilians to hidden locations, power down everything, make it look like humanity had vanished. The Vorn expected a response. A surrender, perhaps. Or angry defiance. Or desperate negotiation. They waited. 1 cycle passed. Then 5. Then 10. Nothing. On the Vorn homeworld, Overseer Knoll sat in his throne room and waited for the humans to answer. His advisors told him the humans were probably fighting among themselves. Their governments were fractured, their species young and foolish. They were probably too afraid to even craft a response. They will surrender, Knoll said. They always do. Every species we have faced has either surrendered or died. The humans will be no different. His most trusted advisor, a creature named Ven, nodded in agreement. Our scouts report that human colonies are going silent. Their transmissions have stopped. Their ships have disappeared from regular patrol routes. They are hiding, Knoll said. Like prey animals. They know we are coming, and they cannot face us. He was not entirely wrong. Humanity was hiding. But not because they were afraid. Across 17 star systems, something remarkable was happening. Millions of civilians were being moved through secret routes to hidden bunkers on remote moons and asteroids. Military personnel were reporting to classified locations. Ships that had been stationed at colonies for years suddenly vanished from their berths, and in the darkness of space, other ships were moving. Ships that no one had ever seen. Ships that did not appear on any registry. Ships that had no heat signatures, no energy emissions, no way to be detected by any known technology. General Hana Yoon had spent 20 years building these ships. She called them the Ghost Fleet. They were humanity's secret weapon, designed for a war that everyone hoped would never come. Lieutenant Commander Jiwoo Park was one of the officers who commanded these invisible ships. She was 34 years old, quiet and focused, with a reputation for staying calm under pressure. She had trained for this moment her entire adult life. Her ship, the Mugonghwa, drifted silently through Vorn-controlled space. Around her, hundreds of other ghost ships moved in perfect formation. They made no sound. They left no trace. They were already deep inside enemy territory, and the Vorn had no idea they were there. Major Sun Wukang was also moving. He led a team of infiltration specialists, soldiers trained to blend in, to disappear, to become invisible, even on an alien world. His team had already reached the Vorn homeworld. They wore the faces of Vorn citizens, using technology that could replicate any species' appearance. They walked through Vorn cities. They sat in Vorn government buildings. They listened to Vorn commanders discuss their plans for humanity's destruction. And they planted small devices in key locations, devices that would stay dormant until the right moment. On Earth, Admiral Taeho Baek sat in his office and waited. He did not pace. He did not worry. He had done everything he could do. Now he simply had to trust that his people would execute the plan. The Vorn wanted a response. They wanted humanity to speak, to beg, to threaten, to do something. But Taeho understood something that the Vorn did not. Silence was a weapon. When you speak, you reveal your position. You show your fear. You give your enemy information. But when you are silent, you become a mystery. You force your enemy to guess. You make them wait. You make them nervous. The Vorn had never faced an enemy like this. Every species they had conquered had screamed, or pleaded, or fought openly. The humans did none of these things. They simply vanished into the dark, and in that darkness, they were preparing something terrible. 20 cycles passed. Overseer Knoll grew impatient. He called his commanders together and announced that the time for waiting was over. "Send a fleet to Earth," he ordered. "Find these humans. Crush them. I want their world burning within 10 cycles." Commander Rix stepped forward. He was the most feared warrior in the Vorn military, a veteran of countless campaigns. He had personally overseen the extinction of 3 species. "It will be done," he said. He assembled a fleet of 300 warships. It was more than enough to destroy any human resistance. It was more than enough to burn Earth to ash. As the fleet departed, Rix felt nothing but confidence. The humans had shown their weakness. Their silence proved they were afraid. This would be an easy victory. He had no way of knowing that his fleet was already surrounded by ships he could not see. Ships that had been waiting in the darkness for weeks. Ships crewed by humans who had trained their entire lives for this moment. The Vorn thought they were hunters. They did not realize they were prey, and the hunt had already begun. Commander Rix stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and watched the stars pass. His fleet of 300 warships moved through space like a swarm of metal insects. Each ship carried enough firepower to destroy a continent. Together, they could burn a planet to nothing but ash and memory. He had studied the humans before departing. They were a young species, barely 2 centuries old in space. They had spread quickly, colonizing dozens of worlds. But their technology was primitive compared to the Vorn. Their ships were slow. Their weapons were weak. Their military was small. This would not be a war. It would be an execution. His scouts had already reported what they found at human colonies. Empty stations, abandoned settlements. No signs of life, no signs of struggle. It was as if the humans had simply evaporated into the void. "They are running," Rix told his officers. "Like animals fleeing a fire. We will find them. We will corner them. And we will end them." His officers agreed. The Vorn had done this 47 times before. The result was always the same. What Rix did not know was that his fleet was being watched. Lieutenant Commander Jiwoo Park sat aboard the Mugonghwa, hidden in the darkness 300 kilometers from the Eternal Dominion. Her ship had no heat signature. It made no sound. It was invisible to every sensor the Vorn possessed. Around her, 17 other ghost ships maintained their positions. They had been following the Vorn fleet for 9 days. They recorded every patrol pattern. They mapped every communication frequency. They learned the names of every officer on every ship. Jiwoo was patient. She had learned patience from Admiral Taeho himself. He had taught her that the key to victory was not strength or speed. It was timing. You waited until the perfect moment, and then you struck before your enemy even knew you were there. The perfect moment had not yet arrived. But it was coming. On the Vorn homeworld, Overseer Null grew more confident with each passing day. His advisors brought him reports of human silence. No transmissions. No movement. No sign of resistance anywhere. They have accepted their fate, Null declared. They know they cannot win. Soon, Rix will bring me their leaders in chains, and we will add their worlds to our collective. He did not notice that 3 of his personal aides had stopped speaking. They stood in their usual positions, performed their usual duties, and never drew attention to themselves. But they were no longer Vorn. Major Sun Wukang wore the face of a Vorn administrator named Keth. The real Keth was dead, his body hidden in a recycling facility beneath the palace. Sun Wu had studied Keth for months before replacing him. He knew how Keth walked, how he spoke, how he held his hands when he was nervous. 2 other members of his team had replaced other aides. They moved through the palace freely, attending meetings, reading documents, learning everything about Vorn military operations. They were not alone. Across the Vorn Empire, human infiltrators had placed themselves in positions of access. They worked in communication centers. They served on supply ships. They maintained fuel depots. They were everywhere, and they were invisible. Each infiltrator carried small devices. Some were transmitters, some were explosives, some were computer viruses waiting to be activated. They planted these devices carefully, in places where they would do the most damage, and then they waited. Captain Yuna Choi was the architect of humanity's invisible war. She was 45 years old, with sharp eyes and a mind that never stopped calculating. She had designed the Ghost Fleet herself, spending 15 years perfecting ships that could hide in plain sight. Now she sat in a command center buried deep beneath the surface of Mars, coordinating operations across 200 light-years. Her screens showed the positions of every ghost ship, every infiltrator, every planted device. She saw the entire battlefield at once, and she saw that everything was going according to plan. Rix's fleet will reach Sol System in 3 days. She reported to Admiral Taeho. Our ships are in position. Infiltration teams report full placement on all priority targets. Taeho nodded slowly. Casualties? None. They have no idea we are there. This was the part that Taeho had worried about most. Placing thousands of operatives inside enemy territory without a single one being discovered. It should have been impossible. But Yuna had made it possible. Begin Phase 2 when Rix enters Sol System, Taeho ordered. Understood. General Hana Yun was also preparing. She led a strike team of 200 soldiers, all trained in close combat and infiltration. They were aboard a ghost ship that was already in orbit around the Vorn homeworld. She had studied the palace where Overseer Null lived. She knew every entrance, every guard rotation, every security system. Major Sunwoo and his team had sent her detailed maps, along with access codes that would open any door. When the time came, she would walk into that palace like she owned it. And by the time anyone realized what was happening, it would be too late. Sergeant Do-Hyun Shin led one of the boarding teams assigned to capture Vorn warships. He was 28 years old, quiet and efficient, with hands that never shook. His team of 12 soldiers had trained together for 3 years, practicing on simulated Vorn ships until they could navigate them blindfolded. They would not destroy the Vorn ships. They would take them. They would capture the crews, seize the navigation data, and turn the enemy's own weapons against them. It was a bold plan. It required perfect timing and absolute discipline. One mistake, one moment of hesitation, and everything could fall apart. But Do-Hyun's team did not make mistakes. None of the human teams made mistakes. They had spent their entire lives preparing for this moment. Back on the Vorn homeworld, Overseer Null held a celebration. He invited his admirals, his governors, his most loyal supporters. They drank and laughed and congratulated themselves on another easy victory. To the humans, Null said, raising his glass. May their silence continue. Until we silence them forever." They all laughed. They thought the joke was funny. In the shadows behind them, Major Sun Wukang stood with a tray of drinks, wearing the face of a servant. He smiled politely as the Vorn celebrated their coming triumph. He thought about the devices he had planted throughout the palace. He thought about the ghost ships waiting in orbit. He thought about Admiral Tejo, sitting patiently in his office on Earth, watching the chessboard, and knowing exactly how the game would end. The Vorn believed humanity's silence meant fear. They believed the darkness hid only empty space. They were wrong. The darkness was full of human ships, full of human soldiers, full of human patience and human planning and human determination. Commander Rix's fleet continued toward Earth, confident of victory. They did not know that they were sailing into a trap. They did not know that the trap had been prepared for weeks. They did not know that the humans had been watching them, studying them, learning their weaknesses. The Vorn had ruled for 12,000 years because no one had ever challenged them properly. That was about to change. In 3 days, Commander Rix would reach Earth. He expected to find a frightened, broken species, waiting to surrender. Instead, he would find silence, and darkness, and something far more terrifying than any weapon the Vorn had ever faced. He would find humanity. Commander Rix's fleet entered Sol system on a cold morning by Earth's calendar. 300 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and spread across the darkness like a net made of metal and fire. Their weapons were charged. Their crews were ready. They expected resistance. They found nothing. Earth hung in space like a blue jewel, but it was dark. No satellites, no orbital stations, no ships. The great cities that should have glowed on the night side were invisible. The planet looked dead. "Scan everything," Rix ordered. "Find them." His sensor officers worked quickly. They swept the system with every tool they had. They searched for heat signatures, energy emissions, communication signals. They found nothing but empty space and cold planets. "They are hiding," Rix said. "They have buried themselves underground or fled to the outer planets. Begin systematic search. We will find them." The fleet spread out across the system. They moved past Mars, past Jupiter, past the asteroid belt. They found abandoned mining stations, empty research posts, and dead satellites. But no humans, no ships, no life. Then the first ship vanished. It was a patrol vessel on the outer edge of the formation. One moment it was there, transmitting normal status reports. The next moment it was gone. No explosion. No distress call. Just silence where a ship used to be. Rix frowned. "What happened?" "Unknown, Commander. We lost contact with the Striker 7. Find them." Before anyone could respond, 2 more ships vanished, then 5 more, then 10. The fleet's formation began to collapse as commanders tried to understand what was happening. Ships that had been stable 1 second simply disappeared the next. "We are under attack," Rix realized. "All ships, defensive positions, find the enemy." But there was no enemy to find. Their sensors showed empty space. Their cameras showed nothing. Whatever was killing their ships was invisible. Sergeant Do-hyun Shin moved through the corridors of a Vorn warship with his team of 12. They had boarded the vessel 7 minutes ago. Cutting through the hull with silent plasma torches, they wore black armor that absorbed light and sound. They communicated only with hand signals. The Vorn crew never heard them coming. Do-hyun's team moved from section to section, neutralizing guards with quick, precise strikes. They used no guns, no explosives, nothing that would alert the rest of the ship. Within 11 minutes, the ship was theirs. The bridge crew was unconscious, bound and locked in a storage compartment. Do-hyun's team had complete control. "Objective secure," he signaled to Lieutenant Commander Ji-woo. "Ready for extraction." Across the system, the same scene repeated again and again. Human boarding teams slipped aboard Vorn ships, like ghosts. They struck fast and silent, taking entire vessels without firing a single shot that could be detected. Commander Rix watched his fleet disappear piece by piece. Panic was spreading through his remaining crews. Officers shouted conflicting orders. Ships broke formation, trying to flee toward open space. "There!" a sensor officer screamed. "I saw something." For just a moment, A ghost ship had flickered into visibility. It was small and black, almost invisible against the darkness of space. It was there for less than a second before vanishing again, but that moment was enough. Rix finally understood. They are here, he whispered. They have been here the whole time. The humans had not run. They had not hidden underground. They had surrounded his fleet with invisible ships and waited for him to walk into their trap. He ordered retreat. It was the only option. His fleet had lost 89 ships in less than an hour. He did not know if any of those ships had been destroyed or captured. He did not know how many enemy vessels surrounded him. He only knew that he was losing. The retreat was chaos. Ships collided trying to escape. More vessels vanished into the darkness. By the time Rix's flagship reached the edge of the system, he had less than 200 ships left. He sent a message to Overseer Knoll, warning him about what he had found. The message never arrived. On the Vorn homeworld, the communication relays went silent. Every single one of them, across the entire planet, failed at exactly the same moment. Engineers rushed to find the problem, but there was nothing to fix. The relays had simply stopped working. Overseer Knoll sat in his throne room, surrounded by advisors who could not tell him what was happening. Reports came in from across the Empire. Contact lost with military bases. Supply lines disrupted. Fuel depots dark. What is happening? Knoll demanded. No one could answer. In orbit above the homeworld, Captain Yuna Choi watched the chaos unfold on her screens. The devices that Major Sunwoo and his team had planted were doing their work perfectly. Communication systems failed. Security networks crashed. The entire Vorn command structure was collapsing. Phase 2 complete, she reported to Admiral Tejo. They are blind and deaf. Recommend we proceed to Phase 3. Proceed, Tejo said. Across Vorn space, ghost ships decloaked. Not dozens, not hundreds, thousands. They had been drifting silently for weeks, hidden in the shadows of moons and asteroids. Waiting for this moment, they appeared around every major Vorn installation: shipyards, military bases, fuel stations, government buildings. The Vorn looked up and saw enemies they had never known were there. General Hanayun's strike team entered the palace through a service entrance. The security systems were already down. The guards were confused, running in circles trying to restore communication. None of them noticed the shadows that moved through the corridors. Hana's soldiers cleared the palace room by room. They encountered resistance in a few places, but the Vorn were disorganized and surprised. The battle, such as it was, lasted less than 20 minutes. Overseer Knoll tried to flee through a secret passage. He found Major Sunwoo waiting for him on the other side. "Hello, Overseer," Sunwoo said, removing the face of the Vorn servant he had been wearing. "We have been waiting for you." Knoll stared at the human face that had been hidden behind his servant's features. He could not understand what he was seeing. "How long?" he asked. "How long have you been here?" 9 days, Sunwoo said. "We have been in your palace for 9 days. We have been in your empire for weeks. Your fleet walked into our trap. Your communications are gone. Your military is surrounded. And you never saw any of it coming." Knoll felt something he had never felt before. Fear. True fear. Not of death, but of understanding. Understanding that he had never been the hunter. He had always been the prey. The humans had not been silent because they were afraid. They had been silent because they were already everywhere. And by the time the Vorn realized the truth, it was already far too late. Admiral Tejo Beck stood before a camera in his office and prepared to speak for the first time since the war began. The message would be broadcast across the galaxy, to every species, with the technology to receive it. It would be heard by the Vorn, by their allies, and by every civilization that had ever feared the collective. He did not smile. He did not boast. When he spoke, his voice was calm and quiet, like a teacher explaining a simple lesson. "This is Admiral Tejo Beck of the United Human Defense Council. I am speaking to Overseer Knoll and the Vorn Collective. You gave us 30 cycles to respond to your ultimatum. We used them." He paused, letting the words settle. "Every fuel depot you control is now in our hands. Every shipyard is surrounded by our ships. Your homeworld's orbital defense grid answers to us. Your military command structure has been disabled. Your communication networks are down. Your fleet has been captured or destroyed. Another pause. You asked for our surrender? Here is our answer. The message ended. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched in stunned silence. The Vorn Collective, undefeated for 12,000 years, had been dismantled in less than 2 weeks. It seemed impossible, but it was true. General Hana Yoon walked through the corridors of Overseer Null's palace. Her boots made soft sounds on the polished floor. Around her, human soldiers stood guard at every door. The Vorn guards who had once protected this place were now prisoners. Confused and frightened, she found Null in his throne room, sitting on the floor with his hands bound. Major Sun Wukang stood nearby, watching the former ruler of the galaxy with calm eyes. Hana studied Null for a long moment. He was tall, with gray skin and eyes that had seen centuries of conquest. He looked old now, old and broken. "Do you understand what happened?" she asked. Null did not answer. He stared at the floor. "Your empire ruled through fear," Hana continued. "You conquered species by overwhelming them with force, by making them believe resistance was useless. You never fought an enemy who refused to play by your rules." She knelt so she could meet his eyes. "We did not fight your war. We fought ours. While you waited for us to speak, we were already inside your walls. While you celebrated your coming victory, we were planting the seeds of your defeat. By the time you realized we were dangerous, we had already won." Null finally spoke. His voice was rough, like stones grinding together. "How?" "We are the Collective. We have ruled for 12,000 years. We have destroyed species older and more powerful than yours." Hana shook her head. "You destroyed species who fought the way you expected them to fight. You never faced an enemy who understood that the greatest weapon is patience. You never faced humans." Captain Yuna Choi's voice came through Hana's earpiece, delivering the final report. "All objectives secured. 9,000 Vorn warships accounted for. 6,000 disabled. 2,000 captured. 1,000 destroyed. 0 human casualties. 0 casualties." The number seemed impossible, but it was true. Humanity had fought an entire war without losing a single soldier. They had done it through preparation, through stealth, through striking, only when victory was already certain. Null heard the report through the speakers in the throne room. His face twisted with something between rage and despair. "You are monsters," he said. "You are not warriors. You are shadows. Ghosts. You do not fight with honor." Hana stood up and looked down at him. "Honor is a luxury for those who can afford to lose. We could not afford to lose. We had 11 billion people depending on us. Families, children, a future. We did what we had to do to protect them." She turned and walked toward the door. "You will be treated fairly," she said over her shoulder. "Your people will not be harmed. We are not like you. We do not destroy civilizations for the crime of existing. But your empire is over. The Collective ends today." Across Vorn space, the same scene played out again and again. Human soldiers took control of military bases without firing a shot. Ghost ships surrounded Vorn fleets that had nowhere to run. Infiltrators revealed themselves in positions of power, having disabled security systems and captured key personnel. The Vorn had built their empire on the assumption that no one could challenge them. They had grown comfortable, confident, certain of their invincibility. They had stopped preparing for real war because they believed no one would ever dare to fight them. Humanity had dared, and humanity had won. Lieutenant Commander Jiwoo Park stood on the bridge of the Mugunghwa and watched the reports come in. Ship after ship surrendered. Base after base fell. The largest military power in the galaxy was collapsing like a house built on sand. She felt no joy, only relief. Relief that the plan had worked. Relief that her people were safe. Relief that she would see her family again. "What happens now?" her first officer asked. "Now we clean up," Jiwoo said. "We restore communications. We help the Vorn transition to whatever comes next. We try to build something better than what was here before. It would not be easy." The Vorn had ruled through fear, and fear left deep wounds. Many species would want revenge. Many would want to see the Vorn suffer, as they had suffered, but Admiral Tejo had been clear about humanity's goals. They were not conquerors. They did not want an empire. They wanted safety. They wanted peace. They wanted to live their lives without the threat of annihilation hanging over them. The Vorn collective would be dismantled, but the Vorn people would survive. Their military would be gone, but their civilization would remain. Humanity would help them rebuild, if they allowed it. Sergeant Do-Hyun Shin sat in a mess hall aboard one of the captured Vorn warships. His team was eating their first hot meal in days, laughing and talking quietly. They had done the impossible, and they had survived. Do-Hyun did not laugh. He thought about the Vorn soldiers he had fought. They had been doing their duty, following orders, believing they were serving something greater than themselves. They were not so different from his own soldiers. War was never simple. Even a war that humanity had won without losing a single life. There would be consequences. There would be complications. There would be new challenges that no one could predict. But for now, it was over. The threat that had loomed over humanity for weeks was gone. The empire that had crushed 47 species would crush no more, and the galaxy had learned something new about the young species from Earth. They did not threaten. They did not boast. They did not make grand speeches or issue angry declarations. They simply went quiet, and when they went quiet, it meant they were already moving. Admiral Taeho sat in his office and watched the reports come in from across the galaxy. He allowed himself a small smile. Just a small one. Then he started planning for what came next. The war lasted 11 days. Historians would later debate whether to call it a war at all. There were no great battles, no burning cities, no fields of dead. There was only silence, then shadows, then surrender. The Vorn collective, which had stood for 12,000 years, fell apart like a structure built on rotten wood. When the fighting ended, the galaxy held its breath. Every spacefaring civilization had watched what happened. They had seen a young species, barely 2 centuries old in space, dismantle the greatest military power the galaxy had ever known. They had seen it happen without a single human death. The Keth Assembly sent ambassadors first. They arrived at Earth with gifts and kind words, eager to establish peaceful relations. The Pale Accord followed, then the Own Federacy, then a dozen smaller civilizations that had lived in fear of the Vorn for generations. They all came with the same message. We want peace. We want friendship. We mean you. No harm. Admiral Taeho received them politely. He accepted their gifts and listened to their words. He made no promises and issued no threats. He simply watched and waited. As he always did, some of the ambassadors asked him questions. How had humanity done it? How had they hidden so many ships? How had they placed so many infiltrators without being detected? How had they planned a war that the Vorn never saw coming? Taeho never answered these questions. He smiled and changed the subject. Some secrets were worth keeping. General Hanayun returned to Earth after the occupation of the Vorn homeworld was complete. She handed command to younger officers and retired to a small house in the countryside. She planted a garden and spent her days growing vegetables and reading old books. Sometimes reporters came to interview her. She always turned them away. She had no interest in fame or recognition. She had done her duty, and now she wanted peace. Major Sun Wukang disappeared entirely. His official records were sealed at the highest level. Some said he went back into the field, taking on new missions that no one would ever hear about. Others said he simply walked away from everything and started a new life somewhere quiet. The truth was somewhere in between, but only a handful of people would ever know it. Captain Yuna Choi continued her work. The Ghost Fleet still existed, still hidden, still watching. Humanity had won one war, but there would be others. There would always be threats. Her job was to make sure humanity was ready for them. She trained new officers and designed new ships. She studied the other civilizations of the galaxy, learning their strengths and weaknesses. She prepared for a future that might never come, because that was what humanity did. They prepared. They planned. They waited. Lieutenant Commander Jiwoo Park took a long leave of absence after the war. She traveled to a colony on the edge of known space, a quiet world with green forests and blue oceans. She spent 6 months there, doing nothing but walking and thinking and watching the stars at night. When she returned to duty, she was different, calmer, more patient. The other officers said she reminded them of Admiral Taeho. Sergeant Do Hyun Shin stayed in the military. He became an instructor, training new generations of soldiers in the art of silent warfare. He taught them everything he knew, from hand signals to ship layouts to the psychology of fear. His students called him the Ghost. He pretended not to like the nickname, but secretly he was proud of it. Across the galaxy, the former subjects of the Vorn Collective began to rebuild their societies. Many of them had been conquered centuries ago, their cultures nearly erased by Vorn domination. Now they were free to rediscover who they were. Humanity helped where it could. They provided technology and resources, medical aid and education. They asked for nothing in return except peaceful coexistence. Some civilizations were grateful. Others were suspicious. They had learned not to trust powerful species, and humanity had just proven itself very powerful indeed. But the humans seemed different from the Vorn. They did not demand worship. They did not threaten violence. They simply offered help and respected the decisions of others. A new order began to take shape in the galaxy. It was not an empire. It was not a collective. It was something looser, more flexible, built on trade and communication rather than fear and force. Humanity did not lead this new order. They participated in it, sometimes actively, sometimes quietly. They made friends and built alliances. They shared knowledge and learned from others, but they also maintained their secrets. The Ghost Fleet still drifted through space, invisible and watchful. The infiltration team still trained for missions they might never undertake. The plans for Protocol Hanji were updated and improved, ready for the next time someone threatened humanity's existence, because there would be a next time. Humanity understood this. The galaxy was vast and full of unknown dangers. Someone, someday, would look at Earth and decide that humanity was a threat to be eliminated. When that day came, humanity would be ready. A year after the war ended, a journalist managed to track down Admiral Taeho. He was living in retirement now, in a modest apartment in Busan, overlooking the sea. The journalist asked him the question that everyone wanted answered. How did you defeat them? How did humanity, so young and small, destroy an empire that had lasted 12,000 years? Taeho was quiet for a long moment. He looked out at the ocean, watching the waves roll in and out. They waited for us to speak, he said finally. They gave us 30 days to respond, and they spent that time celebrating their victory. They assumed our silence meant fear. They assumed we were paralyzed, unable to act. He turned to face the journalist. They should have been afraid of what we were doing while they were waiting. Every moment that passed, we grew stronger. Every hour of silence was another hour of preparation. By the time they realized we were dangerous, we had already surrounded them. But how did you stay hidden? How did you move so many ships without being detected? Taeho smiled slightly. The Vorn believed that strength meant noise. Big ships, loud weapons, public displays of power. They could not imagine an enemy that worked differently. They could not imagine an enemy that was strongest when it was silent. He looked back at the ocean. Humanity learned a long time ago that the universe does not care about our survival. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day. We survived because we were patient, because we watched, because we struck only when we were sure of victory. The Vorn thought they understood strength. They did not understand our kind of strength. The journalist published the interview. It spread across the galaxy, translated into hundreds of languages. Every civilization read Taeho's words and understood their meaning. Humanity was friendly. Humanity was peaceful. Humanity wanted nothing more than to live and grow and explore the stars. But if you threatened them, they would not shout or threaten or make grand declarations. They would go quiet. And when humanity went quiet, the wise did not wait for an answer. They ran.